What if I told you that the boy who couldn't afford a single meal went on to build an empire that fed thousands of families? What if I told you that the same kid who slept on a dirt floor, wore torn shoes to school, and was laughed at by his entire neighborhood became one of the most respected names in his industry? You'd probably say that sounds like a movie. But this is not a movie. This is a real story. And in the next 8 minutes, this story is going to change the way you see your own life. So don't you dare touch that skip button, because what's coming next might be exactly what you needed to hear today. His name was Daniel, and Daniel was born into a kind of poverty that most people only read about in books. He grew up in a small town where the streets were unpaved and the houses were held together more by hope than by bricks. His father worked at a construction site 6 days a week and still couldn't pay rent on time. His mother took in other people's laundry just to make sure Daniel and his 2 younger sisters had something to eat at night. There were days, and Daniel has talked about this openly in interviews, where dinner was just bread and water. No butter, no salt, just bread and water. Sometimes not even that. But here's the thing about Daniel that you need to understand from the very beginning. Even as a child, he had something that poverty could never take from him. He had a fire. A quiet, stubborn, unshakable fire inside his chest that refused to go out no matter how hard life blew against it. While other kids in his neighborhood started accepting that this was just how things were, Daniel would stay up late at night staring at the ceiling and making silent promises to himself. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. But he knew that one day things would be different. School was not easy for Daniel. Not because he wasn't smart, but because the weight of his circumstances followed him everywhere. He wore the same 2 shirts for an entire school year. His shoes had holes in them that he covered with folded newspaper. When it rained, his feet would get soaked, and he'd spend the rest of the day sitting in wet socks, trying to focus on the lesson while kids around him whispered and laughed. Teachers sometimes meant well, but even they would overlook him. When class projects required materials that cost money, Daniel would quietly sit out. When school trips were announced, Daniel would go home and say nothing, because he already knew the answer his parents would have to give him. And if you're watching this on Motivera Stories and you've ever felt invisible, ever felt like the world just kept moving forward while you stood still, I want you to hold on right now, because Daniel's story is about to shift. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and subscribe, because we tell stories here that are designed to remind you of who you actually are. By the time Daniel was 15, he had already taken on 2 part-time jobs. He helped a local grocery store owner stack shelves every morning before school. And on weekends, he helped a neighbor repair motorcycles. Had no formal training. He just watched, asked questions, and practiced until his hands knew what to do. Every single dollar he made, he saved. Not to buy clothes, not to buy food. Saved it with a purpose that most adults his age wouldn't have understood. He was saving to learn. At 16, Daniel used his savings to buy a single secondhand book on business and finance. It was worn, and some of the pages were missing, but Daniel read it so many times that he could recite entire paragraphs from memory. He started applying what he learned to small things around him. He noticed that people in his neighborhood paid high prices for basic goods because the nearest big market was far away. So Daniel, with barely any money, started buying things in small bulk and selling them at a slightly lower price than the local shops, but still high enough to make a small profit. It wasn't glamorous. He carried bags himself. He negotiated directly with suppliers. He did the math by hand. But it worked. By 17, Daniel had built a tiny operation that was bringing in a consistent small income. His parents didn't fully understand what he was doing, but they saw that the stress in the house was easing slightly. His mother cried one night when he quietly placed money on the kitchen table and told her she didn't have to take in as much laundry that month. That moment, he has said, was more rewarding than any award he would receive later in his life. But life, as it always does, decided to test him again. Dad. When Daniel was 18, the construction site where his father worked had an accident. His father injured his leg and was unable to work for months. The small operation Daniel had built was now not just a personal ambition, it was the family's survival. The pressure was enormous. Suppliers started asking for earlier payments. His younger sisters needed school supplies. The rent was overdue. And Daniel, an 18-year-old boy who hadn't even finished school yet, was standing at the center of all of it. Most people would have collapsed. Honestly, no one would have blamed him if he had. But Daniel made a decision in those dark months that would define everything that came after. He decided that pressure was not a sign that he was failing. Decided that pressure was proof that he was being prepared for something bigger. He woke up earlier. He worked later. He cut every unnecessary expense. He renegotiated terms with 2 of his suppliers personally, showing up at their doors with handwritten notes explaining his situation and his track record. And something remarkable happened. They said yes. Within 8 months, Daniel had not only stabilized the family income, but had actually grown his small operation into something that employed 2 other young men from his neighborhood, gave them fair wages, and treated them with dignity because he knew what it felt like to be overlooked. That was his style of leadership from day one. Not loud, not flashy, just deeply human. As he moved into his early 20s, Daniel began to think bigger, enrolled in a free online business course, and spent every spare hour learning. He attended every free workshop in his city, introduced himself to every business owner and mentor he could find, not asking for money, but asking for knowledge. He was hungry in a different way now. He was hungry for growth, and that hunger was infectious. People started to notice him not because of where he came from, but because of the way he showed up. Fully present, relentlessly prepared, and always solutions-focused. At 24, Daniel launched his first official registered business. It was a small distribution company, but it had a clear structure, a mission, and a team that believed in it. The early months were brutal. There were nights where he questioned everything. There were moments where the numbers didn't add up and the future looked uncertain. But Daniel had developed something that school never taught him and money could never buy. He developed an unbreakable relationship with discomfort. He had learned that every time something hard appeared in front of him, it was simply the next level of the game, and he had always been willing to play. By 27, his company had expanded to 3 cities. By 30, it was operating in multiple regions and employing over 200 people. Many of those people came from backgrounds just like his: single mothers, school dropouts, young men with no formal training but full of potential. Daniel built programs inside his company specifically to develop those people, because he remembered what it felt like when no one gave you a real chance. When journalists started interviewing him and asking for the secret to his success, Daniel always gave the same answer. He said the secret was not talent. It was not luck. It was not even intelligence. The secret, he always said, was refusing to quit when quitting felt like the only reasonable option. He said that every single time life told him no, he heard it as not yet. And he kept going. Now think about that for a moment. Think about where you are right now. Think about the thing you've been putting off, the dream you've been quietly letting go of, the version of yourself you keep pushing into the future. What would happen if you borrowed just a fraction of Daniel's refusal to quit? What would change in your life if you stopped treating your circumstances as a final answer and started treating them as the beginning of your story? This is what Motivera Stories exists for. Not to give you a feel-good moment that disappears after you close this video, but to plant something real inside you that grows long after the screen goes dark. Daniel's story is proof that where you start does not determine where you finish. Your past does not have a vote on your future unless you hand it one. The dirt floor he slept on as a child became the foundation of something extraordinary, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. Every hard moment polished him. Every rejection sharpened him. Every time the world said you're not enough, he used it as fuel. If this story moved something in you today, if it reminded you of your own strength, or someone you know who is going through something hard right now, do something powerful. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of Daniel's story hit you the hardest. Your words might be exactly what another person scrolling through the comments needs to read. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this right now, not tomorrow, right now. Because sometimes the right story at the right moment changes everything. Thank you for watching Motivera Stories. Keep going. Your breakthrough is closer than you think.